Monotype.
Welcome to Creative Characters from Monotype, the show where we meet the people working at the intersection of type and everyday life. I'm your host, Graham, and today I'm speaking with Bryan Edmondson, Creative Director and co-founder of C, a studio that's been a key part of the UK design scene for nearly 30 years. Here's something Bryan said in our interview that sums up C's approach to design.
It's just got to get to the point. The best architects know when to stop. And I think it's very much the same with our approach, that if it's not there, it's not meant to be there.
Here to preview this episode with me is my outstanding co-host, Carl.
So now, Graham, we're in something like a superlative feud. In take one of this, I was incredible. Now I'm outstanding. In take one of this, I failed to respond with an adjective for you. I'm going to go with highly intelligent.
I mean, intelligent would have been fine. I'd take that, but highly intelligent. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I know we're here to preview your interview with Bryan, but I want to ask, how are Stan and Herman doing?
Just for clarification, they are my Dachshunds. One is 6, one's 16. Completely different characters, both amazing, and currently sunbathing out in the garden outside.
For those listening, Stan and Herman are the real stars of the creative team here at Monotype.
And actually, they're far more highly intelligent than I am.
That's not what you were saying about Stan last week, but I digress. So, all right, on to more serious matters. Tell us a bit about why you were so eager to have Bryan on the show.
Yeah, good question. Well, for many reasons, actually. One, I've admired the work of his studio C for decades. One of the leading London agencies, in my view. You could put them up there with Bibliothèque, with Made Thought, with North, with Cartledge Levine. They've just consistently produced outstanding work over nearly 30 years. And that's really difficult, particularly when their approach is a lot about reduction and minimalism. Making things simple is actually quite hard, and they're masters at it. So one is the work of the studio. Second is Bryan himself. He's very generous. He's very kind. He's the kind of creative leader that we need more of in this industry.
Well, in the spirit of minimalism and self-editing, I'm going to hand it over to you and Bryan for this week's episode, which I'm sure will be a superlative conversation.
Hello and welcome to Creative Characters, the podcast where we meet the people behind the type and design you love. I'm your host, Graham Sturt. Today we're joined by Bryan Edmondson, Creative Director and co-founder of C. And we're recording the podcast today here in Shoreditch for the first time at Pixiu Studios. I would say, in my experience, it's the most professional setting we've ever recorded a podcast. We pulled all the stops out for you, Bryan.
It's a beautiful studio. It's fantastic.
So I'm going to start with an icebreaker. What was the last piece of design, big or small, that made you stop and smile?
We're doing a bit of work in the football world at the moment. And one that came up, Venezia FC. The logo, it's a couple of years old actually, but I hadn't seen it until recently. And it's so cool, Italia. If you haven't seen it, just have a look at the art direction. The badge is really simple, and one of the shirt sponsors is Kappa, which is one of my favourite logos. So it's a perfect shirt. I don't know if they're any good at football, but the shirt looks good.
Yeah, I love that logo. It's two people sitting back to back, isn't it?
It's one of the simplest. I've never read what the story is behind it, but it looks great on shirts. It looks great on hoardings, on arenas. Yeah, it's a really timeless badge that's been really well managed and really well looked after. I hope no one redesigns it.
Yeah, me too. I think it's timeless as like the Sergio Cecchini logo or something.
Yeah, that's sort of throwing back into my youth, the Tashini.
Well, thanks, Bryan, for being with us this afternoon. So I wanted to drill in, first of all, into some of the foundations and formation of C. I'm really intrigued to understand a bit more of the backstory. Let's go back to 1996, when I understand the agency was founded. What was happening that led you to start C in the first place?
1996, that was us setting out thinking, well, let's just find that niche, just do what we wanted to do, to carry out identity work at the highest level, and for lots of different people, not any particular sector. I'd left a really, really large 400 plus agency, and it was a sort of natural move. We picked up a bit of work for, I think, the Princess Trust, but I suppose we were very lucky because very quickly we won projects for BBC, significant project for EMI, G.S. Smith, Ted Baker, I think. So all of a sudden it gathered steam very, very quickly, which was fun.
So I came out of university in 1993 and immediately came to London, landed at ID magazine as an intern, and my first kind of role in the industry. And then later an agency called 4i in Soho. But I just remember London being a really fertile scene for design in particular and the creative industry as a whole. I'd love to hear about your kind of perspective on London launching C in 1996. What was the scene like for you?
I graduated a year before you. I finished at Newcastle, came straight down. I was lucky enough to gain a position before I graduated at a studio called Roundel. And Roundel were very, very famous for transport identity systems, basically big pieces of type and big logos on things that move 100 miles an hour. And it was sort of the original sort of moving brand identity studio. But there was a few, there's Karsh Levine, AVO, which I think many designers, certainly in my head, was the Mecca, but they weren't big studios, so there weren't that many people who could go and work there. But I just sensed there were quite a few studios wanting to create their own journeys rather than going into the bigger agencies or the medium to large corporate group agencies. And we just took that opportunity. I think it was a very creative time. It was also a very fun time. You know, it was, I think it felt like everybody knew each other.
So you talked about us in the formation of C. I'd love to know a little bit more about some of the people that shaped the trajectory of the studio and maybe some of the moments or decisions that helped shape your initial setup.
There was two of us, myself and John joined a little bit afterwards, and we had a small studio then in Bermondsey, actually, just in a warehouse, and a studio the size of probably half of this studio here. So it was very, very, very cozy. But I think we were lucky with some of the people we met. We didn't necessarily have many projects to start with, but I think we had this belief that as soon as we started, people would knock on the door or call us, which didn't happen. But one project fell to another one. I think the Princess Trust led to some work for a bank. G.S. Smith was also in that factory, that warehouse. And they knocked on the door to introduce themselves, try and sell us paper, which is a bit unusual because we didn't have any projects. But we eventually, many years later, started to work with those guys as well. But I think there was a lot of people around us that made introductions, like-minded people. We then met a team from EMI a couple of years into it. But it's funny looking back on it, it seemed to happen very, very quickly. And projects developed. There was an early project for the Ritz Hotel, which is very unusual, which then led to a TV channel. So all of a sudden, we'd gone in the direction of working in lots of different sectors, and not necessarily by any chance. It was very little strategy about it, that it wasn't almost whatever walked through the door, but near enough.
You often describe C's work as considered. I kind of find that word intriguing and maybe a bit undefined or something. What does that really mean in your process?
I think our approach to identity is to tell one powerful idea. I think it's a process of reduction that we rework and rework. In the 3 studios we've had over the years, we've always been lucky enough to have a great big long wall that we put up scribbles and ideas and thoughts and references. And it's always been that team effort, so that there is an interrogation of the work, so that, when the world does see it, it's tight. There is a really strong story, and I think it's all about the detail. It's about it does the typography work, does the colour, the art direction, and it's all considered. But, months before that process, it probably looks anything but considered. But it seems to just come together rather well.
Yeah, so I love that. In essence, you're kind of going from maybe a maximalist approach towards minimalism. And I know firsthand that simplicity in the way that you do it is very difficult to achieve really well. I'd love to know a little bit about how you can evoke emotion and meaning with work that's so minimal by nature, though.
I think there's a lot of over-designed identities, and I do think that, especially now, nearly 30 years ago, there wasn't that many pieces of medium to execute identities. But there's a lot of noise. There's a huge amount of media noise. So when an identity is launched, it's just got to get to the point. It's really simple. The over-designing confuses. The best architects know when to stop. And I think it's the very much the same with our approach, that if it's not there, it's not meant to be there. And it just sort of gets in the way. The clients we've had over the years are all complex and have lots of different stories to tell, but there's always that one idea that leads a brand, leads an identity to tell a story. But I do think the idea of not being minimal for the sake of it, but just being a careful edit of the work so that you can clearly see what it's about and what it's not.
So we could describe it as restrained.
It's very restrained. I don't believe in lots of complex messages, because you've got to be remembered. And, that one message, one clear identity. And if you think about most of the successful identities over the decades, they're brutally simple and they are extremely confident. And the designers who have been behind them have a very strong view of the work. And that's what we do, Graham. We both do that. And there's no need to complicate it. It just gets in the way.
The work of C is very diverse. You do a lot of editorial design as well. Do you have the same approach towards editorial design as you do with brand identity? And how do you achieve that in a kind of more content-rich setting, such as editorial design?
Very much so. I think it's the same. It's the same approach of telling a story, whether it's printed or whether it's digital. We recently worked on a hotel group, and the start of the identity project was this beautiful lifestyle magazine, and it was a precursor to the actual identity work of the group. So already you're thinking of typography, the look and feel, color palettes. So before we'd even looked at the identity, there was a definite approach and a visual identity. Hadn't maybe quite once locked together, it did make sense. So whether we're looking at editorial design for print or digital, it's the same. You're working with colors, images, typography, and like all editorial, it's got to be instantly recognizable.
I've had experience of running studios in the past. It unfortunately wasn't my bag. So I'd love to know from you how you've, set C in such a good way for such a long period of time at such high quality. So first question, what's something you've learnt about running a studio that has nothing to do with design?
I think patience, belief in what you're doing, and belief that the work will end the way you think it will end, and projects will keep on coming in. I think I was in such a rush in the early years, and I think you do invariably want to get there as quickly as possible. But I think looking back, what are you in the rush for? If you do really good work, people will find you. It's obviously a lot easier now than it was in 1996.
2026, I assume you're going to have a big party, celebrate 30 years of C. I'd love to know, outside of the work that you're doing day to day with clients, what behind the scenes decisions you've made have helped C remain relevant for that long period.
I think our culture in the studio is very much, I think it feels like it's back at university. It's an open studio in terms of everybody works together. As much as possible, we all work on every project. I love the idea that it still feels as though you're back at art school, that everybody is working collectively, sticking things up on the wall. We also have a bit of a culture that we share a lot of work. There's a fantastic library in the studio that we all add to, and people bring things in, and it's slightly competitive of, I've never seen that, that's amazing. They tend to be printed pieces, but then there's lots of other references, so it does feel a bit of a hive of sort of work being exchanged. So, and it's always been like that over the 30 years, and I think that's the hotbed of a really great studio and a team. So it does keep everyone on their toes.
Typically, creatives are labelled as being terrible or unable to kind of run businesses, not business people. That's a cliche, I think. How do you personally balance being a creative leader and a business owner? I'd love to know about that.
I do struggle. I think most studios, I mean, going all the way back to when I studied, a really dear old friend of mine who I studied in Newcastle with reminded me quite recently that we had a conversation that I would set my own studio up. I don't remember that at all, but around about 15 years ago, 13, 14 years ago, a friend joined the studio, David, whose experience is not in design, it's in business. Like C, as a studio, has always surrounded themselves with really great people. Having that extra brain with different experience is wonderful. It's part therapist, part advice giver, and I think the 3 decades have taught me that try and find an opposite partner in the business, someone who can bring a different perspective, because it does help the sanity and it does help the sleeping at night a bit.
So I was introduced to one of your lovely events a while back, where iMagazine hosted an evening at your studio. And these are events that you host off your own back a number of times through the year, with amazing speakers, Malcolm Garrett and Duran Duran being the last one I attended. I'd love to know a little bit about what sparked the idea to open your doors to the public in this way. It must be quite an undertaking as well. And you always seemingly take it on with such good grace.
It is good fun. I think I've discovered that I quite enjoy organising a party. But this started quite a while ago. Back in 2003, we were in a studio just around the corner from where we are now. And we've been very lucky. Both studios had areas where you could actually have an event, not a gallery, but an area where you could sort of exhibit. We'd met Vim Crowell at a D&AD event, and along with Caroline from Graphic, and we got to chatting about the idea of an exhibition of his posters at the Stedelijk Museum, of which he didn't hold hardly any in his collection. So we worked with the Stedelijk Museum to borrow these posters. We had a sponsor, a paper sponsor, the same one that has sponsored us for many years, Jeff Smith. And it was like-minded people that have seen this work. It was called Seen Unseen. And the idea was that you've seen these posters in magazines, online, but when you actually see it in the flesh, the print and the craft, because these things were not computer generated, they were by hand, you see the craft behind this extraordinary work. So I think we've always done this. When we moved studios, I suppose it was in the back of my mind, could we also have a possible space to do something like this? And before lockdown, we had an event by chance with a photographer friend of ours, and the studio was packed. You should have come to that one. But it was to launch a book that we'd designed, a portrait photography book. And then coming out of lockdown, I probably realised that I actually quite like human beings. You know, we'd all been stuck away in rooms and kitchen tables, and I couldn't wait to get back. There was a wonderful exhibition that we did together in 2013 in New York called Pencil to Pixel, and it was monotype, just allowing everyone to see their archives of beautiful work of hand-drawn letter forms to specimens and samples throughout the decades. And that was on one end of the space. The other side of the space was this variable data code wall of changing glyphs and language and typefaces, which most people thought it was a film, an animation, but it was variable code. So it was just a random coding exercise. But everybody hovered around the work. We've got an event later in this year with yourself and Monotype. I mean, I think the creative community, not just in London, but the UK, is a really tight-knit bunch of very passionate people. And there isn't really the outlet, an avenue for many of these type of events where, dare I say it, there's an agenda, there's a commercial agenda. This doesn't have anything like that.
As you mentioned, we have a collaboration coming up as an event. We're hoping that we're going to run that in September. We're going to start promoting that very soon. And just watch this space because, it will revisit some of the past of Monotype and kind of uncover new stories about the future as well and the kind of new developments within type for creatives and business.
And that's Monotype. Monotype's always been at the cutting edge of technology, from metal to, during the Second World War, what the factory was used for. There is nothing like the past of Monotype. It's so unique.
Yeah, we've got it all set up. It's looking good. So let's talk a little bit now about the legacy of the studio. You're not approaching the end of your career by any means, but it'd be lovely to hear about the legacy as it stands currently. A little bit about kind of how you can mentor younger creatives as an experienced business leader and creative leader, and then looking ahead a little bit about the future for C as well. So if I can touch on that kind of working with younger creatives, personally, it's something that I really enjoy, mentoring and helping guide creatives. I'd love to hear from your kind of perspective, how you approach mentorship, both within your team and beyond the studio.
It's a really good question because it's at the core of C. I think around about 25 years ago, it was the first time we'd created an internship that led to work. It wasn't just here's 3 months, 6 months. It was a genuine effort to recruit a graduate, because we all know what it's like graduating into the jobs market and, having to get up early in the morning to go to work. And they're the ones with the big wide eyes open, and it's wonderful for the studio. Every year we have one, perhaps two. Most stay the course and they're then part of the team. Some stay for 5, 6, 7 years, and it's wonderful that you see them develop as designers. And I think that's very much part of C's success over the years, of both seeing different perspectives in the studio, not just my older perspective, but younger, And I agree with you. I think it should be part of our industry that every studio has to find a way in order to mentor. And we mentor students at universities on a slightly more formal level. We teach as much as possible. But I think getting students and graduates into work as quickly as possible to hopefully stay the course in whatever studio, that's important to us, and it always will be. And I think coming into the 30th year next year and our fourth decade, it will continue. It will, if not be slightly more organised, slightly more structured, but that's part of our ethos and it's part of our DNA. It's probably what's made us stick together for so long.
So if you pop your mentor hat on for a minute, what do you wish younger designers focused on more and equally less?
I was asked this question recently at a university talk. I can't tell you which university. And I think the one thing I kept talking about was no matter what you do, where you go when you graduate, whether you're in packaging, whether you're in motion, whether you're in digital, whether you're in web, whether you're in traditional identity, typography is at the heart of all of the skills that we sort of thought we were learning all those years ago. But there's no shortcut to doing and perhaps failing, perhaps making mistakes, perhaps not quite understanding what you think you really knew about type. I do show the work that we've done together with Monotype, and I explained that I thought I knew all there is to know about type until I started working with Monotype. Then you realise you know very little. So I think the craft behind typography is crucial, and don't get too obsessed with how slick things are looking, because anyone can make it look slick. If you're then presenting it to experienced designers, they can see through that very quickly. So I think it's the craft of type, whatever format that's in, whether it's in film and motion or print.
I'm going to touch on the word of the moment, AI. It's unavoidable. It's transforming the creative landscape which we operate in big and small ways. How are you seeing it affect the day-to-day realities of studio life at sea?
We graduated, if you go back to 92, 93 and 1990, 89, we've seen analog to digital. And I think we're very lucky, I think, that we've seen that transition. I often talk in the studio and sound like the old one in the room. And I think the question is, how did you manage to get things done so quickly? The answer is you didn't. But technology has changed and adapted. I think we've been very lucky that we've experienced that from big beige Macs to starting to get smaller and smaller and smaller, and then they're in your hand, more powerful. The technology that is exciting around at the moment is just another thing, and it's already here. It's I think just before lockdown we did a project with DeepMind, and listening to that team 5 years ago was astonishing as to the retina detection and the data behind what that organization is doing. There is a bit of an echo chamber of AI. I think there's slight paranoia, but it's there, and it's part of our technology. And design, graphic design, I think, has always been surrounded by technology, and working with technology and being able to use it creatively. It's slowly being part of our studio. It probably doesn't quite affect the way we work at the core, but it certainly will when we're into production stage.
I think it's really interesting that you reflected on the fact that we entered into a changing industry from the analog to digital point of view. I remember being at university, all of a sudden Apple Classics popped up in the computer room and everyone was ever so excited about this. And then the Quadra came along and everyone was very excited about the computing power of that, which is probably minuscule compared to even a small computer now. Yeah, we came into the industry and we had to learn programs like Freehand and Quark Express, and that was our training, wasn't it? So we adapted as the industry adapted as well. I'd love to hear from you, your perspective on what you think are the kind of skills that will define the next generation of young designers coming into the industry.
Graduating now with the idea that everything moves, everything can animate anything, and I think that's exciting. I think if I was graduating now, I'd want to have an eye on motion, but obviously bedded by the craft of traditional graphic design skills. But I think the excitement of having relatively inexpensive packages that allow you to edit, create film is wonderful. That wasn't there 30 years ago. I mean, how exciting is that?
It's all at our fingertips.
Yes. I don't think I've ever been the most technical person. My studio reminds me every day. But I've been very interested in tech and what is possible. And I think as a studio, we've always tried to just be inquisitive about that next potential. What can we do with it? Whether it be a modeling tool, whether it be around typography. So the skill sets, I think, are still the same. Nothing has changed and everything has changed. So I think the idea that you still have those basic grasp of typography and storytelling, but able to bring them to life very quickly.
C has achieved a high level of success over the past 29 and a half years. I can see that, the work's been consistently great, and I'm sure you've been awarded many times for the work. What does success look like to you now?
It's very similar to the first week, the first year in business. We're still winning work. And I think over the years, whilst I've never been interested in size, the size of the business is this, that, the other, but I'm very excited. And what makes a difference is the clients and the caliber. And what matters now is that they're sometimes bigger, they're more complex, they're more challenging, they're more interesting. And I think each year, I honestly do, I think the sort of last day of term before Christmas is right, what a great year, what's coming next year. Because we've been very lucky that we've attracted like-minded people, but attracted very challenging and complex problems. And I think success is to attract more of those and more complicated in maybe different sectors, although I can't think many that we haven't worked in.
I think most creatives, if they saw your client list, they'd be kind of really envious. It's incredible, the clients you've worked with in the past. You have a great wall just in your entrance to see your studio on Old Street, which is like a logo wall. Yeah, you look at that and you think, well, this is an incredible client list, and it's really diverse, which I think is the most interesting thing for creatives, because we like diversity. We like kind of investigating new clients and different sectors as well.
I think the different sectors as one aspect that's always kept our brains alive. There's always a different project. We've never focused. I know there's been studios there that out there that focus in one sector, and they may be very successful in it, but it must be awfully dull, because I think there's bigger sectors out there with different challenges. And you're right, that wall as you come into the C studio, which is partly the book that I was supposed to bring you today, it's sort of made its way into a book. It does show the diversity, and I think that we're very proud of. And I consider myself very lucky that we've attracted and still attracting very different people.
Oh, and by the way, we need to give you a new artwork for the Monotype logo to go on that wall.
You do indeed. You do indeed. We are producing a few at the moment, so I'll remind you.
I'll send it over. Yeah. Here's a question for you. What's the proudest moment in C's journey that still gives you goosebumps?
I think seeing something that we've done, I get a real buzz of seeing the work and seeing the work that's maintained there for many years, if not decades. I saw a very old friend of mine who owns a wonderful outdoor clothing brand called Regatta. And I told him on Friday that, I come in my commute train to London, and when it's invariably crappy London weather, you see them with the jackets. And I smile to myself that I did that, and it's great. It's really good, and it's very proud to see it. I see other things with a mark. I sort of secretly try to take a picture, but that sounds a bit weird. And it's proud that they're still doing their job and they're doing what they intended to do. There are other things that we've been very proud of. There was a project which involved variable data coding for a campaign for GS Smith, which was about early digital print. And that made its way as nomination for Design Museum Designs of the Year, although I think the Olympic Torch won it that year. But yeah, I think it's seeing the work we do. What we do is it works. It's out there. It's in the world doing the job it intended. And then when you see it actually live and working, I feel very proud. I'm quite an emotional person, and I sometimes do get, I was like, oh, we were behind that. It's great.
So let's move to the end of my questions with a quick fire round. So just some fun, instinctive answers. I'll just throw up the questions. You fire a response. Okay?
That's good. Right.
Grid or chaos?
Come on. Grid.
Most overused font you still secretly love?
Futura Bold.
First album you ever bought?
Parallel Lines by Blondie.
Great choice.
Very good.
Dream collaboration, living or dead?
I've had one of them, which is Wim Crowell, but the other would be Morris Binder.
What's always on your desk?
A pencil, and of course, a monotype notebook.
Which you'll have to have a new one of, I'm sure, very soon.
I'm sure.
If not design, what would you be doing now?
Repairing Vespers. I love Vespers.
Describe yourself as a creative character using only 3 words.
I'd say obsessive, honest, and determined.
Thank you so much, Bryan, for your time today. It's been great speaking with you, and I'm really looking forward to our upcoming collaboration in September.
Thank you.
To check out C's portfolio, go to their website, seadesign.com. Thanks for listening. If you're enjoying our show, please subscribe, rate us, and share us with a friend. Creative Characters is brought to you by Monotype. It's produced by Christopher Olin and Mia Sullivan. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, so take care.